Hey, I'm Mike Capps, and this guy here is Jeff Morris. We're going to get started, close the door, nobody else comes in. All right. So we're here to do a post-mortem. And, of course, by law, that means that we're going to tell you the 5 good things about our game and the 5 bad things about our game. But we're kind of going to wander around, talk a little bit about our tech, a little bit about what we did art-wise, production stuff mostly, because Jeff here is a producer and I am an ex-producer. So a little bit for everybody, I hope. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Epic to get started. We've been around for about 15 years now. Tim Sweeney founded Epic in his parents' basement in Maryland around then, making video games that you would put on 3.5-inch floppies and put in Ziploc bags and sell at the mall. Kind of like crack. Anyway, so that's, from crack to crack. There's a bunch of us now. We're up to about 100 folks. Epic was 20 folks for probably the first 10 years of its existence, and then we grew pretty fast. It was about the time I joined in 2002. Built up a second studio that was working on the Unreal franchise while the main Epic team was working on Gears of War, and then we kind of put everybody together, and now we're a 2-team company. So we're best known, I think, for the Unreal and Gears IP franchises, and we also license our engine technology. So, of course, that's something that we'll talk about during this, is sort of the challenges of being a middleware developer supporting game teams that compete with us all the time. I mean, there's great shooters like BioShock that put Gears of War to shame, and stuff like that at Mass Effect. I mean, it goes on and on. Lost Odyssey, a lot of great stuff built on our tech, and we're supporting them, trying really hard to make them look good while making our own games. It's kind of a weird spot. We've also got some external studios. The Poland team made Painkiller a few years back, and they're working on some other things for us. They didn't work on Unreal Tournament at all. And then we have Epic Games China in Shanghai, which is getting closer to about 100 people now. They're an outsourced company that does primarily artwork, and they're starting some game development. So we use them extensively for art on this project, and I'll talk about them in just a minute. But that's kind of how we've managed to keep pretty small while being a premier middleware developer, also making 2 AAA franchises. Well, I think they're AAA. Okay, so I'm the president at Epic Games, and sort of my role is development director. I run the multiple game teams. Those guys have a lot of autonomy, and I kind of check in and poke and make sure the schedule looks right and that sort of thing, and tell them that it needs more cowbell or whatever it is that execs do to try to ruin game and game design. I also work with the engine team and prioritize what they do for our internal game teams and our external licensee partners, sort of a mix of what is the market excited about, and what is it that Ken Levine wants us to do, and then what is it that our own game teams want us to do. So we sort of got this pipeline of requests that come from our game teams to our engine, and I sort of broker all that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, because he can introduce himself better than me, and he's going to talk to you a little bit more about the Unreal Tournament franchise. In general, we're just kind of tag teaming this, and he'll jump in and make jokes about my bad English and vice versa and stuff like that. So, Jeff.
Say what?
Gotcha.
Hey, everyone. I'm Jeff Morris. I'm the senior producer at Epic on Unreal Tournament. Just a quick blurb about me is I broke in at Origin in their QA department, which was a real privilege because I was a fan of their games. I worked at Firaxis Games with Sid Meier on Civilizations and Alpha Centauris for about 6 years. And then I got tired of, morally justifiable games like Civilization and wanted to go work on headshots and ultra kills. And Epic just, was the perfect studio for that, and some of the games that I contributed something to. I wanted to talk about the franchise of Unreal Tournament before we got into the details of Unreal Tournament 3. Unreal Tournament was an offshoot of a single-player game called Unreal that shipped in 1998. There was a sort of a multiplayer games arms race after that, and our entry into that was Unreal Tournament, which shipped in 2000. That was basically focused on, and ever since then there's been Unreal Tournament 2003, 2004, and those shipped every 2 years afterwards. What distinguishes Unreal Tournament from other first-person shooters is that it's a really, really, really fast-action multiplayer first-person shooter. It got to the point of cliche promoting the product because I always said 0 time to spectacle, and that's really what it was. Like when you spawn in Unreal Tournament, there's no death queue. Like when you die, you're instantly back in. Like there should be 2 guys dogfighting in front of you, a exploding car flying over your head. Our targeting reticle doesn't expand if you're moving. You're just as accurate you're jumping off a building as you are crouching in the corner. And so that sort of, that carnage emphasis is really what separates Unreal Tournament from the number of tactical shooters, for instance, that are on the market today.
It's for the children.
Yeah, right, exactly. The Unreal Tournament 2004 introduced vehicles, and the big challenge there was adding this major component to the game that still felt like Unreal Tournament, still had that fast gratification, and I think we did a pretty good job on Onslaught, which was the game type that leveraged those vehicles in UT 2004. And lastly, something that's been in every UT is the Unreal Engine toolset of the generation that game used. So Unreal Tournament had the original Unreal Engine toolset. Unreal Tournament 2003 and 4 had Unreal Engine 2, and Unreal Tournament 3 uses Unreal Engine 3. So specifically on Unreal Tournament 3, I wanted to explain a little bit about what we're going to do, or what we did, but I wanted to start with showing you a trailer that we did for Gamers Day last year, which is a promotional event our great partners at Midway put together. And this is about a minute that sort of gives you an overview of what we were trying to pull off in UT3.
In 2291, in an attempt to control violence among deep space miners, the Leandri Mining Corporation established a series of leagues and bloody public exhibitions. For 50 years, the fight's popularity grew with their brutality. Then, the war came. From the dark depths of space, the Necklace armies attacked the Terrenium mining colonies. The TriCasts called it a corporate skirmish, but you lost everything. Your family, your friends, your entire clan. Now you're fighting for all you have left. Revenge. From Epic Games, the studio that brought you years of war. Unreal Tournament 3.
All right. And so that touched upon a number of the major goals that we set out to achieve in Unreal Tournament 3. The first thing that we added to UT3 was Warfare, which was a heavily vehicle-focused, open environment, not like a corridor crawl kind of game type. And so there was a lot of innovations that came out of that we accomplished, and there's some things that didn't work out so well, and we'll touch a little bit on those. Another major feature was expanding the vehicle team. So in Unreal Tournament 2004, we had one vehicle team of 6 vehicles, originally expanded to 9, and they're the Axon vehicles. So they're sort of these high-tech mercenaries. This time around, we wanted to do a new vehicle team that was balanced but very different. And so the Darkwalker, which is this giant walking vehicle, that's the Necros main battle tank, where the Axon side is a very traditional treaded vehicle. They're balanced, but they approach the roles that those vehicles traditionally play very differently. We also wanted to expand the single-player campaign and do the best single-player campaign we had done in an Unreal Tournament up to that point. So we had characters. You played a specific character instead of some space clown that you put together. And he had his homeboys that all had their distinct personalities. And you would go off and you cut this bloody swath of revenge through the Unreal universe. And that was much more robust than we had done in the past. Just like all the previous Unreal Tournaments, UT3 was very customizable. We ship with the Unreal Engine toolkit, but a major triumph of this project, and one of the goals we accomplished very well, we believe, was bringing that customization options, making your own maps, mutators, new vehicles, really the Pandora's box of modding to consoles. And UT3 was able to do that on the PlayStation 3. Another feature was character customization, so you can swap your helmets and things like that. There's a couple of quick ones. The hoverboard, which solved a number of problems in wide open maps. Everybody had a hoverboard, and you move about twice as fast as you do on foot, but you can't shoot anyone. If you take any damage, you go flying. And it solved some, from an emergent gameplay point of view, one of the problems that multi-station vehicle game types have, where you have a thing where a driver and there's a gunner, is that the driver takes off without a fully loaded vehicle. The hoverboard had a tether that you could latch onto a vehicle and wheel yourself in and jump in. So, it solved these problems that games of this type have had for a while. And like I mentioned, the Unreal Engine 3 toolkit. Just some data. I'm very much a data-driven producer. I love to sort of keep forensics of everything that happens. We started on January 2005 in earnest on UT3. We're shipping on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. And then you can see the release dates here. This leads to one of the things that went wrong. It's a little precursor. But at the same time, certification certainly extended the gaps between the PC and European releases for the PlayStation 3. And, the other thing is that we're a Sony exclusive for consoles, and that also led to the 360 version being pushed into the future. So while there are certainly mistakes to be made as represented on this data here, fundamentally there were decisions, not necessarily surprises. Some more data. Well, we had these rough numbers of staff on the project if you went by unique contributors, but at no point did we have 26 artists on the game or, all that kind of stuff. So it was a lean and mean project, and but I think we got an excellent amount of work out of it and high quality work at that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my man, Mike.
So I'm the happy, positive guy, and Jeff's the negative pessimist. So I'm going to talk about all the great things that made us happy, and then Jeff's going to tell me how I screwed things up with those decisions that he was referring to earlier. So rather than talk about them each in turn, I will talk about them like this. So first of all, we know shooters, right? I mean, this is Epic. We've been doing this for a long darn time. I was a huge Unreal Tournament fanboy long before I joined Epic, and it made college hard back when I was playing it, and so luckily I don't need to use my college education anymore. I'm in games. So we think this is the best one. We've been making UT for a while. We think 2K3 was a bit of a misstep. That was done largely by an external team, so we brought it back in-house for Unreal Tournament 2004, and we were more proud of it, but we made some kind of mistakes with gameplay. Adrenaline really wasn't a fit. A few other things if you know the franchise. So this one we think we did exactly right. We got the jumping right, the pacing right. You didn't have to be a hardcore, crazy, I can head shoot anybody to have fun in Unreal Tournament anymore, but we still reward those players who are really good at the game. That comes from playtesting every bloody day. That's kind of one of the cool things about working at Epic is we, and it's a massive time investment, one which Jeff hasn't really encoded in this, is that we would put 12 to 16 guys in a playtest every day for an hour or two. And so that's a huge man-hour cost to be playing maps again and again and again to make sure it was just right. But we think it came out perfectly. We're really proud of our inner core loop. It's fun to shoot the walls and not people. It's fun to shoot people. It's fun to die in Unreal, and that's so key for us. You die about every 14 seconds in a game of Unreal, right? So if it doesn't look really cool with blood going everywhere, people aren't going to like the game. We also knew how to start with quick previs, to build a rough space and start playing it. This is a space that's not lit, not meshed, and we drop in the power-ups, drop in the guns, we start playing right away. So we're building these in a day, maybe less. Build a couple of them, and we'll play them, and the good ones bubble to the top. Then we'll go in and mesh it, work on visuals, and then worry about a lighting pass after that to make sure it really comes together. And at all these times, we're still playtesting to make sure we didn't screw it up, that we didn't put a whole bunch of hitchy collision spaces around something that takes the fun out of the map. Worrying about visibility is especially important. When someone puts a lot of man-shaped geometry at eye level, well, that makes it really hard to see people, and this isn't Rainbow Six, so we want you to be able to see enemies and blast them to bits. Talking about some of the things we did, we have a ton of levels in Unreal Tournament. This is the most we'd ever shipped any of our games with. And again, it's because we just know how to make a deathmatch level. Those times look pretty big, and the reason is that new game type of warfare. To do the design pass on a deathmatch level really is a day or two, and then some playtesting time and iteration, more for capture the flag and on. But for our warfare types, where it's a really much more complicated battleground, those took man-months to get right. So here's kind of some of the different looks of levels. Visually, I think it's a real feast, something I'm really proud of. But I'm not an artist. So this unified look and feel is another thing that we're really happy that we did with Unreal Tournament. For those of you who've played the other Unreal games, you may know that it wasn't necessarily the most unified look and feel in the past. You'd have like crazy buildings on a skyline, blaxploitation film Afro chick mixed in with robots, mixed in with Hellraiser rip-off characters and all sorts of stuff, and it didn't ever feel like the same game. It was kind of something cool about Unreal as you dive in and it's new every time, but it's made it hard for us to be proud of every piece of art and every screenshot that could come out of the product. And this is something that we really changed this time around. We spent a lot more time on concept and a lot more time on consistency, and this new Necra set was kind of what we attacked the most. we built a few environment sets that are sort of standard to the Unreal environment, industrial, that kind of thing. But we jumped in with the Necros. We really wanted this look of, you can see here the tentacles and stuff. This is an infected map where the Necros have started to take over the space and make it more like their own homeworld. And I'm just so proud of the visuals and the characters feeling like they belong in that world and that she should be driving this vehicle. Like, it all matches together very well. And it brought a consistency to our franchise that we just really hadn't had in the past. There's also a nice benefit on outsourcing that we were able to build this kind of consistent look, get it started, and hand it off to our Epic Games Shanghai shop, and they were able to run with it really well. So we got a massive amount of art in, not just from those 26 internal guys, but from 25 to 50 sometimes artists working in our Shanghai shop. And we even went through an art director change. Our art director decided that it was cooler to direct Thundercats than to work on Unreal Tournament. Whatever. So he moved on to Hollywood, and we wish him all the best. But we were able to go through that, and we defined a look well enough for UT that we didn't fragment. So the other thing we're proud of on this project is our content pipeline was just so mature. The amount of work we got done per man on this project and the amount of things that we kept in game versus throwing away, I'm just really proud of that. I mean, 18 vehicles that were much more different than we'd ever done before. It wasn't just tanks and jeeps and warthogs or what have you. It was really different vehicles that played very differently, physics-driven components of the vehicles that were crucial to gameplay, and that's a real challenge. Same thing, the weapons, we always have to have tons of weapons, and every one of them has to come back, and it has to be in the game, because if you don't have a flat cannon in Unreal, you might as well have killed their baby, right? I mean,
I would add that, for a first-person game, that's the thing that is always on a player's screen, and you want as much detail. There's a lot of third-person, next-gen games, because it's cool to have this guy running around in front of you that shows all the amazing detail that the technology can deliver. For a first-person game, that's the weapons.
So for environment sets, we did 3 of them in-house, and the other 2 sets were done at Epic Games China. Again, we started that with concept. We did original breakouts and did some of the meshes to get them going in the right direction, and then managed them very closely. But by the end, they were doing epic quality work. So you can see it's a pretty significant number. Those are man days, and there's a lot of them. So this is some of the Necra set, the transition from concept to in-game. Gotta love that screenshot. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. Okay. So we spent a lot of time in cross-training. This is new for Epic. We had, this is the texture artist, and maybe he knew how to model when he came in, so he was allowed to do a little bit of that. But no, go back in texture. So this time we started letting people swap around in different areas, and we had some real benefits from that. The best was finding the diamonds in the rough, the guys that had been only gameplay level designers for a long time, and we gave them the chance to do visuals and levels, and some of them really blew us away. Some of them really sucked, but some of them really blew us away, and the other guys at least were happy that they got to try something new. So that cross-training that sort of the UT team took the hit on, where we let people try different projects, is paying off now in Gears, where we have much more flexible team staffing ability. We can move folks between departments.
Let me jump in there real quick and add that, the process that we had seen not working was, see you in 2 weeks, I hope you can do it. And what we implemented instead was direct interaction with those resources, with the leads, whether it was a director lead or a project lead, daily on that, or twice a week, so that at least they had some meaningful guidance and didn't explore unfruitful direction. And so that was the real crux, is like, okay, we're going to lose all this time from our most valuable resources, but in the end it was a multiplier for future projects.
And the modularity is something that we learned on Unreal Tournament 2003, building pieces for reuse and meshing, and that, it's built in and ingrained. It's the way we concept now is in modular pieces, and that pays off so much. And then, I've mentioned a number of times that we had a lot of success in outsourcing because we had a consistent look that was well-defined, and because we had such a mature pipeline, because, we've been doing a lot of games with Unreal Engine 3, not just our own, but external partners. Hundreds of titles are being worked on with UE3, and it's done. I mean, that content pipeline really works, and it's solid, and so it's really easy to hand it out to an external partner, give them all the documentation they need, and let them run. Okay, so this is my baby. I love the fact we were able to be so successful with mod support. You may not know, but our very first title at Epic Games was ZZT. It was actually Town of ZZT because it was a mod that Tim built on top of his modifiable engine with a level tool called ZZT. The art was terrible because Tim Sweeney did it in his parents' basement. But we've been doing it since then, right? We've always had sort of open architecture engines, and it's really paid off for us. So this was the first time we were were able to take this PC modding to the consoles. And I couldn't be more happy after arguing with Microsoft for a year about whether or not we could ever put mods on their platform, their very closed network surface. Now they're starting to put their own mods on the platform with XNA. So I'm hoping that we're turning the corner, and maybe they can be as cool as Sony was about putting mods on their closed console. So that would be great, guys. There's nobody here from the press or Microsoft, is there? Okay, so, but it was really cool on PlayStation 3. Yes, I see you. I know a few of you. All right, so it's been really great that mod authors could make on the PC script mods, change the way guns work, write new levels, all sorts of stuff. You can even do a total conversion on PC and then compile it, cook it for console, and put it out for free on a website, and people are sticking sticks into their PS3 and playing levels that you made on a PlayStation 3. That's huge. You can totally crash your PS3, I suppose, if you try really hard. I'm sure there's some dangerous way that you could make racial hatred mods and put them on the PlayStation 3, but that's the open internet, right? I mean, that's what it's supposed to be, and we seem to be quite mature enough to handle this in the PC space, and I hope that we're going to be able to be mature enough to handle it in the console space as well.
Well, we did bring the PC modding experience.
Yes,
so that's
exactly.
part of the PC
so that means you get 4 mass hats, and all right, okay. So it's also been really great for us promotionally to be able to say that we've done that, and we were the first, and that's cool. We were the first ever to demo on the PlayStation 3 anywhere in the world at a public demo, and now we're the first to ever do mods. So badass for us, yeah. Okay. And then I was going to say UE3 was one of the things that went right. Treating ourselves as a licensee has been really successful. That's the way we do it internally, that our team is a licensee that makes requests to the engine team, which is a completely separate group of guys with their own reporting structure, and I'm sort of where the game teams meet to the engine team. The reason we did that, we changed our entire structure around this so that we could mimic what we do with our external licensees. Because if Jeff and the UT guys have no idea when we're making some foliage improvement, then you can be darn sure that our licensees in Korea don't understand when it's coming and aren't getting what they want. So it was really sort of a useful exploration on support requests and delivery paths internally in our group. So, I like to say that I'm not just the president of the Hair Club for Unreal, but I'm also a client of it, because we are. I'm also a client of Hair Club for Men, and it's not working. But we have to sort of eat our own dog food with Gears and with Unreal. We use our engine all the time, and we have the same frustrations. And why isn't the engine team giving us what we need this week? But it's been really useful for us. But when it comes down to it, we got a working cross-platform engine that is crazy optimized. I can't emphasize enough how much help we get from external partners on making Unreal Engine easy to use and run fast, because they get a lot of benefit out of it. NVIDIA sends their SWAT teams out all the time to work on Unreal Engine 3, because when they make my game faster, and they make Mass Effect faster, and they make Bioshock faster, and everybody else who's using our tech as well. So they get this sort of multiplying effect. And so that meant we've got, the fastest stuff, and AGEA and Intel and NVIDIA and AMD and all those guys are banging on us all the time trying to make Unreal Engine faster. So that was a real benefit for us as a licensee of our technology. Plus, we get it for free. So that's also pretty cool. So we have a bunch of partners that work with us at UE3. We're clients of middleware. We're big believers that, sure, maybe Sweeney could write a physics solver that would be as good as the one in... what's AGEA's mod? What are they calling it now?
PhysX?
PhysX, there you go, thanks. And now Intel's PhysX, right? Yes. Maybe we could do it, but why bother? Because we can get that one for free, and it's really darn good. So we had a number of partners who are already integrated into Unreal Engine 3 for Gears and for our other licensees, and so it gave the UT team the ability to look in and say, do we want to use SpeedTree? We'd never used it before, but all we had to do is flip an if-def and say yes with SpeedTree and try it out. And they decided they liked it. It was really useful for some of the maps they were working on, and so we paid a license fee to SpeedTree, and we were good to go. It was really nice to not have to go through an integration phase with all these tools, because they were already working in there for us.
And that's absolutely what we gained, is that the integration was a week, if at that, and then we were immediately saying, how can we get more out of this asset? What is the most complicated tree we can integrate? So we were asking the interesting questions rather than just trying to see them in-game ever.
Yeah, I think the only partner on here that we had to work with closely for this title was GameSpy. Everything else was sort of already working in the engine for other licensees or for Gears of War in the past, something like this. So it was just kind of a flip a switch and it works, and we tried it out and decided, yes, this is right for Unreal, which is a totally separate decision process than what's right for our other titles. Okay, so lots of stuff went right, but the really exciting stuff and the juicy stuff you're all here to actually see is what went wrong. So that's Jeff.
Yeah, I better preamble this and say Midway rocks. I love their, working with them. Their PR departments, their marketing departments were great. So when I'm bashing the promotion of the game, I'm not bashing the work they did. It was more a sort of a mixing of issues that led us down the less fruitful road. So let's start with the interface. Basically, the user interface that we shipped with in Unreal Tournament 3 was radically different from what we started out
He means
with.
fucked.
That should become clear in a moment. Basically, what we started with was something that was almost solely driven by art, and that was in part because we had very strong evangelists for doing something different there, but also because the team itself was focusing on different regions of the game. And so to show you like what our blue sky idea was, I want to show you a little movie here. This is the kind of stuff you'll never see outside of GDC, so, justify it. Oops. And so this is a power core, one of the major objectives in the warfare game type. You're inside it. Normally you see it from the outside. And as you damage it, all these plates go flying off of it and all this. But, once we started looking at it, I was like, okay, well, there's no mouse over indication. Like, this was so slammed to the console side that it didn't accommodate all the platforms that we were doing. Not to mention, nobody wants to sit through loading that asset every time they go to the main menu. So there was a number of issues with that. But what it led us to do was create some very specific game visualizations that we were going to implement using what we liked about that. The only problem is not everybody liked those elements of it. And so this was the direction that we actually implemented pretty much throughout the game. It's a little spiffy, some spiffy slanting and all these things like that were very cool for a D-pad, but were just too imprecise for keyboard and mouse controls, not to mention, difficulty to localize. And like, you don't want a bunch of strings side by side because as soon as you put German in there, you're just asking for overruns. So there were some very major problems there. So at the last minute, we rebooted. And we basically took this visual look that we were doing for the packaging, totally oblivious to the fact that Stranglehold, another Midway game, was doing something very similar, and took that into the game. And so we implemented something that worked better for PCs, still had some of the neat features of the original concepts. But what it did was it made us reinvent the wheel at the last minute rather than polish what was there. And so fundamentally, the big issue that we had with the UI was that we just didn't have enough time to polish it. We had already committed to a ship date of 2007 when we made these changes, and unambiguously, these were the correct changes to make. The UI bashing that we got from our fans would have paled compared to what we would have received if we had shipped it originally. It was the right decision, but it wasn't a perfect decision.
Yeah, I should say we built the time in for polish. I mean, that's something that Epic has learned the lesson many times, is take the extra time and polish it because you get better review scores and everybody likes you. But this was the time we built in the polish, but it could have been polish the turd or replace it. And so it really hurts. It was one choice or the other. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
The next thing that didn't quite go the way we intended was our character customization system. Here's some just rough data on our characters, and in general, character team, of which we had 5, was a very significant investment of time. The last option is, since we're a first-person game, if you're holding a sniper rifle, and you're a giant lizard monster, you can't have a robot hand, you got to have a lizard hand. And so there's a lot of little details. And of course, having a customization system means that you have to not only rig those original pieces, but for level of detail for performance, which we do, you have to rig those as well. It was just a supremely complicated pipeline. And one of the problems with it was, there's a number of problems with it, was that it just didn't add the diversity. I went and saw the APB, another UE3 game, presentation yesterday, and their character customization system is like from the hand of God. Ours was so coarse that you didn't do one of the major goals we wanted to have accomplished, which is somebody sees you wearing something cool, they're like, oh, that's cool, how do I get that? Or how do I I unlock that, or how do I get access to it? But I mean, these are the kind of changes that we're making, and most people just can't even tell that you've done anything. Not to mention, you can see that there's 5 helmets per team, which is not a lot of diversity in the scheme of things. And then you multiply that by, you have to duplicate a similar amount of complexity or diversity across all the teams supported. It was just, I felt like when people talked about the early days of streaming, like, we're going to get rid of load times. Isn't that cool? Without fully understanding all the ramifications of what that meant. And we had a similar problem with character customization. It also had that fatal production flaw of starting asset production before we knew how we were going to stitch these things together. And so one of the upsides of previs is that you can agree on things before it gets expensive to make changes, but one of the downsides is that there's this constant pressure once you have approved concepts to put them into production. We did that. We succumbed to that pressure, and in the process created roughly 2 teams worth of guys that required maybe 3/4 of their original investment to rebuild into the character customization system. I wish I could say we were acknowledging that risk when we started down that path, but it was closer to we were oblivious to it. So it was a real problem that we'll always go back and we'll throw out the character customization system if we need to, but we passed a point of no return. And then the last thing that just absolutely blew about the character customization system was the fact that it was not satisfying to use. I already talked a little bit about how we had a lack of diversity, but at the same time, we're a game where you're like running at, I guess the equivalent of like 25 miles an hour, 27 miles an hour against hyper-detailed UE3 backgrounds at a mid to long-range combat distance. Like, nobody even knew if you were a robot or a Necrus, let alone if you had a different helmet than what they were working on. Ironically, people modded the game so that you can mix all those character customizations between teams, so you have a robot head on a lizard body. People noticed that. Like, people were like, hey, how'd you do that? That got attention. But within the teams, it wasn't so much. And that was something else we tried to do, is we tried to make it where it was very difficult. It was very easy to make something cool, and it was kind of hard to make something that looked dumb. And that led to a lot of sort of restrictions on its use. And probably one of the worst things about it is that when you connect to a game that is already in session, we allow dynamic joining of multiplayer games. We don't force the other people to stop and load your unique character in. You're in the default guy until a server travel happens, and that load can happen. And the load, it also screwed up our loading because we had to take all these components and then stitch them together into the final asset before we went into the game, which increased our load time. So just sort of in hindsight, a feature that just didn't measure out on the bang for buck meter.
It's totally Jeff's idea. And
yeah, exactly.
I fought this the whole way. And
all right. Okay, the next thing that didn't go quite as well as we had hoped was the campaign. And the campaign was the single-player story where you're playing Reaper, a very distinct personality from the Twin Souls clan. He's got his 3 teammates, and those are the people that you play with throughout the game in the single-player campaign. And there was a lot of successes, but it was a huge amount of effort to do something more than the standard UT standard ladder. And one of those elements that was a great triumph on one hand, but also a huge amount of work and not really appreciated in the final product was the cinematics we did. And so here is I'm going to show you about a minute of this cinematic to give you an idea of the quality of the cinematics that we were delivering for a feature that, didn't sort of pan out.
Nice office. Yeah, some crib. Name's Malcolm. Reaper. Here's a night he hired me to run specialized. That can't be cheap. Sounds like you know my rep. Yeah, who doesn't? Most Grand Tournament trophies ever. Leader of Thunder Crash, a.k.a. Thunder Cash. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, all of which makes you a highly decorated civilian.
I've run Thunder Cash in the wacky conditions where you had to dream up.
Yes, Malcolm, the wackest indeed. So basically, we spent a lot of time. I think I blocked out how long those cinematics took, but they took a lot. The VO took a long time to get right. The script, everything was a big effort there, and it worked. Those are some of the finest cinematics we've done in a epic game.
Certainly better than Gears of War. I mean, we all think that they came out better, except for the writing, because I did the writing, and it's not as good as the other writing.
Word.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyways, so one of the things was that the gameplay for the campaign, specifically the sort of global thing where you're choosing which mission you're going to next, just wasn't as polished as the gameplay. Like, we love what we accomplished with the gameplay, and we understand that came from the time we invested in polishing that mechanic. But the single-player campaign came on at a very late date, and we just ran out of time with our commitment to ship. And so basically it was something that, it's good, and again, if you compare it to any first single-player portion of a previous UT, it is not head and shoulders above what we had done in the past. But it wasn't BioShock. And the way we promoted this feature was that, you are Reaper and you're on this blood quest. And in a sense, we were almost too successful at portraying this image in people's minds of what the single player was going to be. The single player is far closer to what you would experience in like a real-time strategy game where you're over your mechanics of destroying the other guy's base. You have this narrative. And for us, we didn't want to change what UT meant. We were never going to make it where, like, when you died, you had to reload. It's a game about respawning, and that was the right decision. But you wanted to get people excited about it. But I think we did too much of that. Just sort of falling out of that, what I mentioned about not having enough polish time on that single-player globe. I mean, there's other games that do these mechanics, and there's all kinds of cool things they have you do here. Like, there's either cache that persists between missions, or you have certain objectives. If you do something here, that persists in later missions. Those are the kind of casualties that we had. And so it never really crescendoed. The gameplay was fun, but saying the campaign was fun comparing to plain instant action where you're just in against a bunch of bots, it just never came together. And then the last thing I'll say is that the story never really clicked. People didn't really care about Reaper as a person, and fundamentally there's some reasons why that was. One was that it was basically the time between cinematics where you sort of were re-immersed in the story, and then you went and did gameplay. That could go for 4 or 5 hours before you would see another cinematic. Another one of our major devices was that in game you would have the characters that you play with every mission in the single player talk. That's how you learn their personalities. They would do little VO arguments between each other in the missions, but we just didn't do enough of them. Every mission maybe had 1 or 2 sort of barks where they would say things, and in the early missions there was more of them, but it never sort of gelled together.
I think we found that it was really working, but it was too late again, right? To get
Exactly.
all the actors back in the studio and, get me to write another bad script and all that.
Like, of the devices that we brought to the single player, that one really did work. It just wasn't consistently applied.
Yeah.
And then, because I love ribbing Mike on this, his story was even
I didn't make
noticed
Malcolm,
it
dude.
I
didn't make him that cool and tough and street.
Hey, you're fly. I mean, don't get me wrong.
I just write him.
Yeah, that's true. That is
the player.
So, yeah, people notice. I'm sure this had something to do with it.
Ouch.
All right. This is just a general producer wine topic. Fundamentally, we ran out of polish time at the end of the game, and some areas of the game are so hyper-polished that it's hard to say that the game ran out of polish time, but certainly many features did.
I think it was that we polished the things that we know best a whole lot, and the parts that we weren't as familiar with, we didn't polish as much.
That's true. The 1.0 features, character customization, the campaign, the things that we hadn't done at Epic were definitely the ones that didn't go the best. And I would say, when I worked at Origin, Richard Garriott would often say that teams' familiarity with what the genre is one of the top 5 things to determine whether or not a product's going to be successful. You take an RTS team and you stick them on a puzzle game, and there's going to be a learning period, a ramp-up period that you can very cleanly sidestep if you have the same people working on the same type of game. We also had basically the issue where we didn't release in a single market or a single region simultaneously. And that's just not the way you maximize marketing. That's not the way you get sort of a critical mass of players for a multiplayer, a game with a strong multiplayer component. And again, these weren't like we're just throwing darts at a dartboard and said that's it. It was either, cert headaches or exclusivity or various things that caused us to shift our focus from either one platform to another. There was just a lot of dynamicism, especially late in the game. And then, of course, we walked into the first-person shooter Christmas of all time. I mean, it was
such a fun time to be a gamer.
Yeah, I know.
Shitty time to be a developer.
It was a bloodbath. So there's only so many ways you can slice that pie. I will say again to Midway's credit that they were very aggressive about regions that normally aren't considered staple gamer regions.
We're
like
very big
Brazil
in Russia
and Russia and things like that. We know how to sell product in Russia now, which is is wonderful, and they're huge fans. Some of our best promotional events were in Russia. And so, we definitely, we're not in a bad situation, but at the same time, the competition was just surreal. Okay, so promotion is also something that didn't quite go as well. We got 20 minutes here.
Yeah,
let's see. I wanted to say up front that, again, Midway did an excellent job, and I'm not really talking about either their PR or marketing departments. And they got us every single cover we went after. I mean, we got Xbox, games for Windows, PSM. It wasn't always just the U.S. regions as well. We definitely got presence in UK. This is just a fraction of the covers that we got, and that's for a game creator, such a privilege to see your title promoted on all these different magazines. And this extended back from the initial announce of the game almost 2.5 years ago, or over 2.5 years ago, back when we were Unreal Tournament 2007, we were getting covers and premiere covers. This was our announce issue, and I swear we had 3 screenshots to put it together, but it's so great to work on a franchise that people care about. I mean, new IP is exciting and great, but for a developer, there's a real opportunity to maximize your craft on a franchise. You just have a lot of opportunities you wouldn't normally have. Now, boiling it down, what I think was one of the biggest problems in the promotion of the product is that we announced over 2.5 years before we shipped. It's so hard to keep people excited about the Darkwalker, the Leviathan, which was this 5-station Uber vehicle, the hoverboard. There's so much great stuff in UT, but you just can't talk about it year after year after year. You find the drive to talk about new things, and that's where I think we got into trouble with the campaign. That was the major focus of our 2007 promotional efforts, and we were successful, but again, to almost the detriment of the customer because their expectations were not being met. And so it's just very tricky to sort of talk about these beloved features that if you announce them all 6 months before you ship, people will be like, I can't believe this is all in a product. But by the time we actually shipped, the Darkwalker was old news.
Yeah, we should say that this is kind of one of the casualties of being in the engine licensing business, is that we had X thousand people who already knew about Unreal Tournament 2007, I guess we'll call it at the time, before we had announced it, because we give a copy of this game to all of our licensees and anyone who's evaluating the engine and, anybody else who finds it in China. So with all that, it was we kind of had to announce it, if that makes sense. We kept Gears of War completely under wraps until we decided to announce it and weren't sharing that with licensees, but we had to share Unreal as an example of how to use the engine. Right. And so we needed to put it out there because it was going to get out there anyway. And everybody knew something was probably coming, but they had names and they had levels and they had screenshots. Like thousands of people had it. And so it was just better to go ahead and announce. But that really bites us in the end of having such a long build-up time.
Yeah, there's hard to achieve critical mass. A necessity of that was that we talked about a lot of features that we correctly cut. Like we said, it's going to be cool to have this sort of Battlefield-style commander mode where a guy can sit there and give information to his teammates. And man, is there nothing that feels less like UT than sitting and looking at a 2D screen that you're clicking stuff? And so we cut that feature, but we had talked about it in the press quite a bit. We had a thing where terrain would sort of transform. So if you captured one location, it would convert to Tentacle Town. But then if the good guys took it over and went back to normal, it just wasn't fun. It slowed the game down. It made it harder to look at a node and say, that's something I'm supposed to capture, because it can look different at different times. We cut features that deserve to be cut. And that's to Epic's credit, because many of those features were well developed and had a lot of effort and time spent on them. But the problem was that we felt the need to talk about them before we knew they were going to be in the game. And that, again, led to some expectation problems. We changed the name from Unreal Tournament 2007 to Unreal Tournament 3 for a myriad of reasons. And I'll say that, it's a negative in the sense that a lot of people are like, did you ship? Like, people weren't clear what happened to Unreal Tournament 2007, but positive was that it was sort of like a jump-on-board point for people when it was called Unreal Tournament 3. I haven't heard about Unreal Tournament 3 because they didn't know it was Unreal Tournament 2007. So, in a sense, I fear what our promotional prospects would have been if we had not done the name change and it was still UT 2007 with all the potential fatigue of that feature set. I think we got a little boost out of the name change, though again, I don't think anybody would argue that rebooting what you're calling your product halfway through is a desirable thing. So, and then lastly, because we were showing so early, we had to make decisions about our pipeline before we should have. Basically, there were looks of urban areas, looks of vehicles, looks of weapons that we had locked down because of our early demonstrations that I wish we could have revisited. Okay, at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
All right, so it's not all doom and gloom. Actually, it sold kind of well, and we're doing okay, and it reviewed kind of well. PlayStation 1 reviewed really well, which was fun. Just to run through these things again, and then we can open it up for questions and see what you guys think was good and bad about it that we didn't say. Knowing our genre, you can't beat that. We've got an experienced, it's such a battle-hardened set of vets for making first-person shooters, and that helped us a lot. And, the lesson we caught was anything that was new and outside of our comfort range are the areas that we underestimated and therefore didn't have enough polish time for. Gosh, no one's ever learned that lesson before making video games. Having a content pipeline that's solid and in place was great. From day one, we had a shipped engine, and that really paid off for us, is being able to dive right in. Again, the places we had trouble were things where we changed the pipeline. We know how to make characters for Unreal Engine. We've been doing it for a while, and then we decided to completely mess that up for character customization and went and threw away a bunch of our characters. That's the only stuff we had to throw away was where we changed the pipeline. The UI stuff, I'm still a little torn. I really love being able to have artists get free and make a really cool UI like they would make it for a movie and not worry about every issue about TRCs and TCRs and everything else. But we haven't figured out how to take that fun artist visualization and bring in that knowledge and expertise that we have from making. Unreal Tournament 99, I think, has the most ugly menus of any game ever, but it's so functional because it's basically a Windows MFC app in drop-down menus and tabs, and you can customize anything, and our hardcore players love it, but it's just not a console-friendly look. So that's something that we're going to keep learning, I guess. We have to be a little careful about opportunity-based marketing, but, it's tough. When GI says, I'll give you the cover next month, you say no? Not always, and we had some really great opportunities. I don't regret launching UT marketing when we did because it was the right thing to do. It was going to come out anyway, and at least we got some splash and some news for it, but it really was tough, like Jeff said. It's tough to keep your mouth shut for a year and a half about what you're doing. We're just going to have to learn to do that. We did it for Gears, right? We announced Gears Wednesday, and it's coming out this November. So that's a pretty darn short marketing burn time for what should be, I hope, a pretty serious project. So we'll see if we can keep our mouth shut and do the right thing. And don't be afraid to cut features. That's the best part about my job, is getting to cut fun stuff that's not quite fun enough. So, so anyway, we'd love to get your questions about UT or life in general. Bring up the lights if you would, Jeff.
Yep.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
So, campaign mode. Did you guys decide Did you decide at the beginning that you were going to do a campaign mode, or did you have to add that halfway through? And why did you decide you needed to have a single-player campaign?
Yeah, one of the things we realized was on consoles, it's very difficult unless you're Star Wars or Counter-Strike to, have a multiplayer-only game that has no real single-player to it. So one of the initial goals of the project was to do a far richer single-player campaign than we had done in previous UTs, but that varied. Like the scope of it changed constantly during development. But the idea that there's something more than a ladder was one of the fundamental goals of the product.
Yeah, just the different demographic on console. For Unreal Championship 2, we definitely pushed beyond the ladder and had a story and cinematics and that sort of thing. And then UT was, I think, very similar. UT3 was similar to UC2 in scope. Cheers.
Thank you.
Next up.
Hi, thanks. First I want to say thanks for the talk. It's always really interesting to see what goes into the production of these great games.
thank you.
What I was curious about was you have so many engine licensees, and you have to give the game to all of those guys. Do you worry about it leaking out? I mean, do you just think it's going to happen? Do you lie awake in bed at night worrying about it? What do you think about it?
No, I mean, of course we worry a little bit about it, and that's why we're somewhat protective. Like the cool, like the Necros vehicles, which was sort of a big step change for us, we didn't put those out in the licensee hands. So they have captured flag level, deathmatch level, a few other things, a couple characters, couple weapons, couple vehicles to sort of have a full example of what they need. Yeah, it's a little scary, but boy, do we have mean lawyers. I'm more worried about somebody leaking the source code to UE3 than I am a first shot look of one of the levels of Unreal Tournament or something like
I will say it's harder on new guys who are like, you don't give anything away, and then you're like, okay, everything outside of this folder is going away, so move. It was an inclusive giveaway rather than an exclusive, but it was for good reasons.
Mm-hmm. Cheers.
First of all, thanks very, very much for the better editor since 2004.
Oh, yeah. Cheers. Well, I mean, it was for us, really, I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it, too.
Definitely a big improvement. I actually have two fairly quick questions, I think. I'm very much interested in the mod side of this and all that, and I actually teach a class on this. So is there a timeline or an idea as to when there might be all the documentation released or better documentation for doing that sort of stuff?
Well, we've been doing some of it. I think probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, we took a big chunk of the Unreal Engine 3 documentation and launched it. So you've seen it since then?
Yeah.
Okay, so the best thing to do is to send support requests. Like, you can come up and talk to me later, because honestly, it's just a mass. I mean, it's thousands of documents, and working our way through it and saying, well, this is probably safe to make public is just a tough job that kind of happens by request. Can we see this doc? Oh, yeah, sure, duh, kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then we've got some textbooks on the way, and hopefully some competitions and stuff like that. That will kind of give it that extra push.
Okay, and my second quick
Yes.
question is, as new engine features get developed into UE3, are those features planning on being retrofitted back into Unreal Tournament 3, or is it pretty much feature frozen right now?
That's pretty unlikely. I mean, the amount of code that has changed in Unreal Engine since we shipped UT3 PC is, dramatic. It's, all the cool stuff we showed on Wednesday at the keynote. That's all new features. It's not in Unreal Tournament 3 because we locked the code base, month, 2 months? When did we?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, something like that is when we split off from the main branch. And so we will be, we always maintain our games, and we'll be putting out cool free content and patching and stuff like that. But probably it's not going to be major engine features.
Okay.
We'll just have to make another Unreal Tournament someday.
Yeah, we did release the 1.2 patch this weekend, or this week, so, we're constantly releasing new content and
Great.
fixes.
Thank you.
So.
Yeah, cheers. Anybody got anything else?
Okay.
Then thanks a lot. We'll be up here for a few minutes or outside
Thank you.
for anything else. Cheers, guys.